So I am really lucky to have with me today Simone from Play with Food. She's a nutritionist who's also studying occupational therapy at the moment and a mum of two children. And Play with Food is around taking the stress out of fussy eaters in our family. So welcome, Simone. It's so lovely to have you.
Thanks, Darrell. I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, no, thank you for joining and being able to share some of your extensive knowledge and skills from working with families. So maybe start and tell us a little bit about you and things that you maybe do that the audience wouldn't know about. If they went to your website, they may not find that.
Sure. I think, I suppose if you went to my website at the moment, they wouldn't know I'm doing my master's in OT because
Oh,
I've been
yeah.
a bit lax in doing my website lately. But the in terms of me, I am actually from Queensland originally. I moved to Sydney via Echuca in my early 20s. I was working in the food industry, um, in nutrition and quality management, and I was really involved in food in general. And it was my last role when I was the quality manager, and they tacked on the OHS and employee wellbeing to my title. That made me kind of go, oh, I got to look into this employee wellness sort of thing. And I think my real aha moment for what I wanted to maybe do later, because I'd kind of been on a bit of a career trajectory and, doing all the things pre-kids and very much a workaholic and just going with each next step as it came. And I was in the lunchroom one day and I was doing an employee wellness initiative, and I brought in the slow cooker and I was making soups up for the shift workers on our rotational shift patterns and having a chat to them, and just their appreciation for a big vat of noodles, soup, and I brought in barley and lots of vegetables and just talking to them about it. And basic food education I found was probably not as high, and I probably, from a bit of a privileged background, kind of thinking, I just thought everyone knew about, having 5 serves of veg a day. And, that sort of aha moment came when I thought, really want to get down at the ground roots and maybe work on, just having a really good appreciation for health education, but not badgering people over the head with it. And I think
Yeah.
it had to be a really nice, responsive way. And I sort of thought that, and then going into my first round of maternity leave went, oh, I'd really like to change it up and see what's out there. And I started Play with Food from that. So that's probably something that I don't talk about much, but that real aha moment always comes back to my mind and going, never take your privilege for granted, or what you know about, 5 serves of veg, or just those ingredients, what goes together if you throw it in a slow cooker. Just because I know that doesn't mean everybody knows that sort of stuff. So I feel like I'm always checking myself, and I think that's something I think we should all try to do, so that we are aware that we have that power to help people without, like I said, that, you know,
Yeah.
brandishing the
Yep.
health sword sort of thing. It's
Yep.
all about supporting and uplifting people in a kind and gentle way. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I know it is like that. I sort of sometimes forget that people struggle with organization and even meal planning until you're like, oh yeah, this just comes second nature to myself, but to other people, it's more difficult, and they require and they love your help and your support. So it's so great to have someone like you with that knowledge and that, willingness to share nutritional information. So then tell us about the business journey then from that, how
Yeah,
you
so
got
the
into.
business journey has changed and morphed as I've gone through my journey with it. So I started Play with Food about 9 years ago, and it started out as community fruit and veg experience classes. I just had kids come in and have a bit of a play and just enjoy it. And it came from my nutrition background. And I think I was only about 4 or 5 months into it when an OT came along to watch me. And I was like, yeah, come along, no problems. And she's like, do you know that you pretty much do feeding therapy, the way you approach it with your responsive style and the way you're engaging with the kids? And I suppose I found a bit of a superpower I didn't really know I had with just the way I can get down and play and enjoy it, because I've been in corporate land, so turning around and doing this as a bit of a business that I'd like to develop, but I hadn't grown it in my mind at that point. And having the OT come in and watch me and sort of explain, this is what we would do in a therapy situation. And she said, luckily, there's a really well-known feeding therapy protocol, and they were coming to Westmead Hospital only a few months later. She's like, you should enroll in that course. So I went along and I did my SOS feeding therapy course. And that really opened a lot of doors, because I met so many wonderful speech pathologists and OTs at that day, or those 3-day intensive course. And I got to see the types of research that underpins a lot of why we need to help children get in tune with their body so that they can eat and feel confident around food. And it really appealed to me in my play nature, my wanting to empower the child, really aligned with a lot of what was going on with that therapy. And another OT approached me and said, would you like to come on board as our nutritionist on the feeding therapy team? So I really went into that sort of into my second year of business, was then doing that as well. So I really went from just a play-based community experience to definitely a more therapy, working with children that had maybe more complex feeding concerns than some of what my mainstream sort of classes were originally. Yeah.
And so do you find that you attract a certain type, like is it children who have maybe had chronic illness and feeding, or is there a particular, need that you seem to attract more than anything?
Yeah, I suppose in general, I do have a lot of children that have maybe sensory processing concerns, or have had some oral motor difficulties or pain associated with eating early on. So maybe severe infant reflux. They might have had preemie babies, often will have quite challenging concerns about food, and that comes from, there's a lot of research into how preemie babies may end up being potentially fussier than other children. But I also find that I don't want to exclude anyone, and sometimes parental stress, and that's one of the big red flags too, because that can cause a downward spiral in the whole family dynamic. So I definitely don't exclude anyone, but I do find the behaviours that will cause the most concern are generally the big behaviours, where there's food refusal regularly, there's dropping of favourite foods, and they get less and less dietary repertoire. So those sort of red flags are the ones that do come up a little bit more. And I would love to help people all across the different parts of the spectrum, but I suppose there is a bit of a myth out there of they'll just grow out of it, and people sort of sit and make do with hard things more than they probably should. So I think it's really important that everyone knows it's okay to ask for help or get out there, read a bit more research, but don't feel like if someone said don't worry about it, that you necessarily should take that advice straight away, because if you have a feeling in you, it's probably genuine.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that feeling of, people saying, no, he's fine, and going, no, it's not fine. And even now with a daughter going into teenager ages, I found her palate's obviously changing as well, and sensitive issues around some foods, and the sound of food, eating food is definitely a challenge that we find in our home as well. So I suppose you're probably looking at not just young toddlers, babies, but across age groups as well.
Yeah. So I suppose my approach is quite playful, what I do with children. I usually work with up to about 12-year-olds, just because that's probably where my skill set is, sort of that 2 to 12. Beyond that, we'd be looking at I know some great resources, and I have great people I can refer on to, just because you do need more of that psychology and understanding of the lifespan that's happened before as well. So there is a lot that goes into feeding. Sorry, just got a noisy car going past.
Oh, you're right. Oh no, I can't hear it. I have
Okay.
noisy children that are supposed to not really be making too much noise, but they are. So maybe also then talk about the language and how we can use positive language in our home.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it would really build
stress
on Fleur from your previous podcast had some wonderful language swaps, and I thought I'd do a bit of a shout out to anyone who hasn't caught that podcast of yours, because it really made me go, yes, okay, I like what she's saying, because it definitely is in alignment with what I talk about a lot. And a lot of what I do is really about how do we change our language so that we're helping our children feel like they belong at mealtimes, rather than I want my child to fit in with what I thought we were going to be doing. And feeding isn't about fitting into a mold or fitting into someone else's expectations. I think we've got to remember the whole point of eating is to fill up our body and nourish ourselves, and it comes from within. It's not an external thing that comes from outside of us. And that's what I love about responsive feeding and the way I approach it. It is, I work with the children to reconnect with them so that they know how to, approach a new food and feel confident that if they don't like it, it's okay to spit it out, or it's okay to have an experience with it without, pressuring themselves or feeling pressure from other people, because that external pressure is what can get in the way of just being naturally curious and taking on a bit of a learning mindset. So some of the language ideas I have really tuned into that. And I suppose a couple of the ones I have today that I thought we'd talk about is taking away some of those negative sentences at the meal times. So if you're about to say, don't throw your broccoli, or no, don't do that, the no's and the don'ts are definitely the difficult parts, I suppose, in feeding, because they come from probably your childhood, and they're coming out of your mouth before you really recognize that they're coming out. So one language swap I have for that is, instead of saying no's or don't, say you can, and then finish the sentence. So I just trained myself that instead of saying no or don't, say you can, and then work out what I actually wanted them to do.
That's a great
keep
one.
the broccoli on the tray over there if you don't want it close to you. You can spit your broccoli into the napkin, rather than whatever was going to happen. So giving a nice little you can instruction can help you with avoiding the negative. And the benefit of that is you've given them a really specific instruction. They can't say, if I said, don't jump on the couch, but I'm in the middle of jumping on the couch and I'm getting that lovely vestibular input, and I'm loving this proprioception and all of the feelings and that sensory release that I'm getting from jumping on the couch. And then you say, don't do it. I'm like, no, but I feel great. It's like, oh, you can go and jump on the trampoline outside. Would be so much more specific, and I know what you want me to do, and I'm still going to get that feeling if I do that thing. So I think if we change around from the no's and the don'ts to the you can, it helps in parenting anyway, but especially around food, because we want them to know what to do with food. We don't want them to know what not to do, because the list of what not to do is excessive. We're really, eating can be brought down to smaller tasks that are easier for them to follow.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love it. I need a poster of that in our kitchen. I think you can.
And then I suppose another few things that I thought of is I also do a bit of the yum and the yuck words. I hate saying them because they're both the Y words in my vocabulary. But there's something that I've sort of brought my kids up, and something that was instilled in me was not to yuck someone else's food, because that's putting your external pressure on it. But it also goes the other way. If I'm saying yum, 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 yum to someone who genuinely doesn't like that food, it really is another form of pressure. So I think I always talk about the yumming and the yucking of foods can really confuse kids. They're very literal. So if we're putting a lot of these subjective terms in their heads, it can get quite confusing for them. So I keep to tangible ideas. If I want to talk about food and I can't bite my tongue and I need to say something, I'll say, wow, that broccoli is really bright green today, rather than anything about
The
my
taste.
subjective experience of it.
Yeah.
You know, obviously I am a big believer of no food talk at the table is better than any food talk. But I know that some people grew up with a lot of food talk around them, and they're going to find that habit really difficult to break. So sometimes having that nice gentle step to moving towards a you can phrase, or a, oh, what can I say about that food that isn't putting my opinion onto the person? You know, keeping it tangible will really help. Oh, that has a big smell.
Yes.
Garlic, rather than, oh, yuck, I don't like that smell. You know, you can imagine that feeling you get from that.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, they are perfect. They are wonderful tips that any age you can implement those. Like, I definitely know that the can't will be replaced here in our house around some of the things, because I feel that some of it's a little bit more about pushback, and I'm becoming a teenager. I can make my own food choices. So yeah, that's a great tip that you've just shared.
I think that you can, and around their food choices, it's really important to let them have, you know, that I offer you the food, you can choose from it type mentality. Because if we are telling them they have to do things or have even more food rules, the more food rules there are, the harder it is to do the thing of eating. So trying to simplify it is really important. So I've offered you, that's what's on, that's available. That's really where the parent can have that ownership. And what it does is it brings up children who have autonomy, and they've been making that choice for a long time, and they'll know what it feels like. So when they are adults and out in the world, they've got a good foundation of having that autonomy for longer maybe than their peers, and hopefully making good choices.
Yeah, definitely. What about lunch boxes? That's what I'd love for you to share, some lunchbox, like lunch ideas that for possibly for older children, because the other thing I suppose that happens as they get a bit older, they don't want to bring the bento box. They don't have time to eat it. So it's got to be quick. And because I've got to get outside and kick the soccer ball as soon as the teacher lets me out. And they also have less time to eat than they would when they're younger, where they might get the full 10, 15 minutes to eat. Whereas, you know, they're older, they work up until almost the bell, they have 5 minutes and then they're out the door. So quick ideas would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is where you work with your child and go, okay, what have we got on our repertoire? What's happening? How can I get the most nutrient dense thing in the most quickest way possible? Is pretty much what you're aiming at. So, and I know that, you know, it's not cool to have a lunchbox sometimes. So you're looking at things that are like easy to do. So maybe enviro bags that you can like quick Velcro to open, get out, eat, you know, but remember that lunch is one meal out of maybe 5 or 6 of the day. So making sure that we've got some nice grab and go ideas with some veggies and fruit in them, or, you know, but also some, like, look at the food groups. That's my main group, is go, have you ticked 5 food groups roughly through the day? And for me, especially where my kids were for their first school before we moved to Melbourne, the bags were out in the sunshine all day in Sydney. And I was like, yeah, even with the best insulation, and by the time you put them in an insulator and a box and stuff, I'm like, you're just eating into time and attention span by having all that stuff. So I kind of made the decision at that point, protein is going to be at breakfast and at dinner, and I'm not going to worry so much about having a lot of protein in the lunch boxes, because they were always risky foods given the food situation, what was happening, and knowing the ergonomics of it. So I think for the older kids, you're looking at ergonomics, making some really good you know, bars at home or something like that, packed with nutrients. Have a look at the school's allergy policy, because obviously nuts is something where I think most schools are nut friendly in
Yeah,
terms
they
of,
are these days,
we
aren't they?
don't have to maybe exclude
Yeah.
all nuts, but just keeping an eye on what you are allowed to have. But I find that, having some bars or pre-made, easy to get through foods is actually quite helpful for them. And cutting up fruit and veggies in a way that is quick and easy to eat. So sticks over big chunks, or so they still want to basically, when you bite into a food, you want to be able to get it over to your molars, chew for a couple of seconds and swallow it. And there's going to be foods that are just not going to work for the lunchbox because of what's involved in just chewing them.
Definitely. Oh, that's a great tip though, to think about putting the protein breakfast time, dinner time, and focusing on what we can get into them in the daytime is just whatever they can grab and go,
and
really.
also watch what they do with their foods. I've had a child before where I was like, the parents like, we just don't understand why it's taking her so long. Like, she barely eats at lunch, and the teacher says, no, we give them the 10 minutes. And then I sat down with her and we were doing a session, and she picked up the sandwich, had a bite and put it down, chewed it, picked up the sandwich, had a bite. I was like, do you always put your sandwich down between each bite? And she's like, yeah. And it's just that no one had actually watched her eat a sandwich, and she's, I think, in year 3 or 4 at that point. So for all this time, that's how she ate sandwiches, but she wasn't eating them on the weekends with her family. She wasn't eating them for dinner. So no one was actually watching her eat this sandwich very often. So sometimes it takes that second set of eyes to come in and go, how about we try holding it and while you chew? And we tried that, and she was like, oh, that's quicker. But it was, sometimes, and like I said, you always just have to check where you're at with what's going on, because she might have been told, or she watched someone do it, and that's how she learned how to eat the sandwich. But it's just that matter of how do they eat those foods. So school holidays are a great time to pack what you might normally pack them, and just sit and go for a picnic and watch how they open the boxes, how they approach it, because you might be like, I can't believe it takes you 5 minutes to open that. And it will give you a really good insight about what might be happening.
Definitely. And like, I've got a little story to add. So my son would bring this lunchbox home, and it'd be like, why, like, this was only last year, why is there still this bit here? Didn't you have enough time at lunch? And he's like, no, because that's in the recess section. It's like, what do you mean the recess? It's like, well, there's different sections in the lunchbox, Mum. And so if even at lunchtime, I don't have time, I don't go back and eat that. That is just a recess section, and that'll come home still not eaten. So that was a real eye-opener for me to hear him voice that. So now just making sure that we've got the right amount in those sections, because he's not going to have time to eat it either. So yes, just having a conversation.
And I know it seems like, but that's why not? But you can never check. You have to always check what other people's understanding is, because it's across the board. So many people approach things in different ways that you may not think are logical.
Yes.
But to them, it totally is. So it's really good to just have those open, honest, communication times, or just those observation times where you're not like scrutinizing them, not talking about the food, just gently being with them eating.
Definitely.
Seeing what happens.
I think that's a great idea, is during school holidays for parents to be, have that time and watch their children eat, because some children take a long, being a teacher, some children do take a long time to eat, and just their conversation, they're having a conversation with other people while they're eating. So they actually then are the last finish, because they're like, oh, everyone's gone and I haven't even started yet. So definitely a great tip to do. Yeah, exactly. And so, Simone, how can people find you and reach out to you, or what? I know you've got some great recipes on your website. What else though? How can people come?
So my website is playwithfood.com.au. It's probably it's up to like, there's a lot of recipes there, but I suppose I'm most active while I'm doing my master's degree on my Instagram account, and that's playwithfood_au is my handle there. What I'm doing this year on my Instagram is actually every Tuesday I'm publishing a recipe about chickpeas. And I know it seems odd, but there is a method to my madness. I wanted to make sure I had something to keep my account going while I'm busy doing my master's degree, but also to sort of say this is a learning food for my family, and I'm not just going to give up after one presentation. Chickpeas are ridiculously versatile. They're really cheap. And there's not that, I know some people can be allergic to chickpeas, but in general, they fit a lot of dietary and religious requirements. So they are a global food that you'll find them in most cuisines somewhere. So I have taken on that challenge of showing how versatile one food can be, just to remind people that we can present foods in lots of different ways, and it's not about, oh, my kid didn't eat it, vanished, that ingredient's gone. It's about, hey, I can be inventive, I can keep, having it because I might enjoy that food. And it's really important to remember to serve foods to your family that you enjoy, and don't just get stuck in their rut with them, because the more they see you enjoying food in a nice, natural way, the more likely they are to, by osmosis, understand more about that food. They don't have to eat it to learn about it. They just need to see it, smell it. They might just observe you chewing it, and that'll give them so much more knowledge about what to do if that food comes along their path later in life, or at another point, or in a social situation, because that's the skills and the things we need our kids to do. So that's why I'm talking about chickpeas.
Beautiful. That was something I did love that.
So I might be crazy, but
No.
there is a reason for it. And the other thing I've got for your listeners today is a code, Simply Happy, at the checkout. If you want my webinar on, it's like a parent seminar with some ebooks and recipe books that come with it, just on those positive language tools to use at meal times. So I've got 100 of them, I think, but I think it's really important that we learn and listen to ourselves and go, what's an ingrained habit here that's actually not serving me? And maybe I could help my kid a bit more by just doing my own language swap. And they're the things that we can take on as parents, that hopefully isn't too taxing, but it might be something that your listeners might be interested in.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Simone, for all your tips and sharing your knowledge. And hopefully, I'm sure that people will go away now and just be curious about their own eating at home and their table and the things that they do, and maybe make some language swaps as well. So thank you so much for your time, Simone.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Oh, no, it was our pleasure. Thanks.
Bye.